deep at the heart of the true self.
If it was intuitive of what you had going on this planet, we might as well just turn on the lights and everyone goes home. You see, there must be secrets. There must be an overlay. There must be a veil. There must be the predetermined energy that says, can't be so. This creates a little mountain to climb, does it not? Those who are watching this now, be aware that this is part of the mountain to climb. For it has to do with your belief, what you've been told, as opposed to what you feel.
There are still what you might call newcomers on the earth who haven't necessarily run the gamut of all the different kinds of incarnations you could have as a human on earth, but the majority of you, yes, have experienced just about everything you can possibly experience. You have killed and been killed. You have been a benefactor and been benefited. You have been every gender, every experience. You have been every family member. You have had just about every disease that can be had. You have experienced absolute joy in certain lives, freedom, fear, everything, the whole spectrum. Most of you at this point.
They always describe it as being like a roller coaster. You know, if you've never been on one before, you kind of get on. You don't know when you're going to go up, when you're going to go down, when you're going to go around the corner. And it's a little scary. And, you know, it can be a little fearful, but then you get off the ride and it was great and you want to get right back on. And that's what it's like through the incarnational cycle. You go through and it's a little scary and a little bumpy, but as soon as you get off, you're like, that was a great ride. I want to go on it again. So that's how they describe it to me, that once we see the big picture and understand it, we're excited to go back down.
Most people don't believe in anything before life. Nothing whatsoever. So you have 85% of the earth, according to Time magazine, that believes in a religion that supports the afterlife, and yet you have only about 4% of the earth, which would be Hindu and Buddhist, who actually believe in a forelife, which doesn't make spiritual sense. Somehow, mom gives you birth and you have a soul forever. But that's the teaching of the church.
But there was nothing before. Yeah.
There was nothing before. Ask them.
Yeah.
There was nothing before.
You have pretty much all done it all. That's why you're arriving at the end of the cycle of limitation, because there's really not that much left to explore. You have all done it all. So now you are remembering, you're waking up out of that particular dream, because you're at the end of that dream, almost.
Because when you come into a physical existence, you become a creator in the physical dimension. You're creating your life and the activities and your experiences, your responses to the experiences. But it's all about the progression of the evolution of one's soul, isn't it? Yes? Mm-hmm. And reincarnating allows you more and more understanding and knowledge through experience.
You exist. That will never change. The form may change, but the fact that you exist will never change. Existence does not become non-existence, because non-existence is already full of all the things that will never exist, and there is no room in non-existence for the things that do exist. Existence is the only quality existence has, to be. There is no not to be.
Jesus.
A great teacher. No more the Son of God, however, than
I am.
you are. Exactly. A great teacher, yes.
It makes a good story. Humans need a hero. They need sports heroes. They need political heroes, although there's not many. They need technology and science heroes, but they also need an icon that they can look up to and worship, because they don't go within.
The archetype of the Jesus, the Savior, is still very powerful on the planet. And yet that slowly is being replaced by people finding it within themselves, instead of needing it to be out there as a figure.
In the early days of the Catholic Church, there was, how would you say, a basic understanding that Jesus would appeal to the masses because he was a human, and that he would be such a fine example. It took them well over 500 years to even decide amongst themselves how he would be presented to the public. In your modern terms, would be how his PR campaign would be handled. So they developed this very interesting but not necessarily accurate story of Jesus, which wasn't even his real name to begin with. It was, when he walked on earth, it was Yeshua ben Joseph. They need someone to look to and to worship, and their leaders, even religious leaders, who have no idea of what the I am principle is about, who have no idea that the God is already within. They encourage their groups to worship some far-off Jesus, because it is a wonderful way of perhaps what you would call anesthetizing them a bit, take their mind off their daily pain, but it's also a wonderful way of controlling. So whether it is the Christian church, whether it is so many of the other religions, they create these icons. But the icons are out there somewhere, and they're generally hardly based in reality.
For those of you who are, extremely light, guess what? You've had extremely dark lifetimes. You've probably done some extremely dastardly deeds. So that's difficult. A part of your quote-unquote New Age movement wants to be all light and all happy, and we'll tell you that is not what this lifetime is about, because there are prejudices there. All right? And the idea here is that you release all of that prejudice, all of that judgment against the dark, because you cannot have one without the other.
Those who are biased to the light only are basically imbalanced, and they're going to have to then, sooner or later, experience their dark part, which they're deathly afraid of. They're afraid of that dark part within. Why do they label it dark? Why do they think it's evil? Is just another aspect of them.
One doesn't want to be in the light by being in the denial of one's shadow.
The idea, remember, is that growth is the product of integration of all that you are, not the exclusion of anything. It is the allowance that everything is valid, the balancing of everything is valid. That's why the more evolved you become, you actually become more aware of more dark, because you're willing to integrate it all and balance it all within you.
And so there are some who want to, step into that space and say, oh, I'm nothing but light. I haven't had any dark lifetimes. And we will tell you it is precisely the opposite. Because usually it's not until you have mastered the dark or some aspect of the dark that you are given abilities and to work in the light as well.
Momentum to snap into the light is actually gathered by exploring the darkness as deeply as you can.
Cryon says on the other side of the veil it is much, much different. We don't have the minds we do now. We don't have the logic we do now. And this is like a play. This is, Cryon says, it's very much like a play. When the guy, when the curtain closes and the guy with the knife who has been murdered by the other guy, the curtain closes, they all get up and go have a party. There's no animosity, they don't care, they don't carry a vendetta. And so when we're on the other side of the veil, it's like we regroup and come back in.
So there are really no victims or villains?
There are no victims and villains. And this, of course, will fly in the face of every single teaching that anybody's ever heard in this nation. There is also no heaven and hell. This is a very interesting theme, and I'm glad you asked that, because when I'm in Israel, which I have been numbers of times, especially in the heart of it, in Jerusalem, these questions are asked. It's inconceivable that Hitler is not in hell. There is a line you cross. That guy has got to be being punished right now. According to my channeling, the men and women I work with who channel, that is not the case. He came and he did something. He went to the dark side, if you want to call it, and a whole bunch of people went with him. And he had the choice, and so did they. And he created something that we just find abhorrent and just awful. And yet, when the curtain closed, he got up and everybody gave him a party.
That being who was Hitler agreed to be of service to that collective, to that group, to that genetic line. And that's a hard one for humans to see, all right? That's a very hard thing for them to begin to forgive. And then that goes back to the veil, of why the veil is placed there, here, so that you don't remember everything.
Everybody who was what you would call adversely or tragically affected by the era of Hitler and by Hitler himself was there because they created together, they co-created that reality.